The CDL Kickoff Classic just finished this past weekend, and that means I need to update my power rankings tier list. Now, moving on to the actual tier list itself, I think my first answer is going to be very self-explanatory. Toronto Ultra are in the S tier. I do think they are the best team in Vanguard at the moment. Now, I saw Marky B say that they were struggling online a lot, and they had made huge strides in their performance in the last couple of weeks, and they were able to come into this event and win the whole thing. But here's the thing. Toronto Ultra is one of the most consistent teams that we've ever seen in Call of Duty. Since they picked up Insight back in the first or the second event, I think, in Cold War, or I think it was one of those, they have yet to place outside the top 3 in any event. They are just one of, if not the most well-rounded and consistent teams in the league. And it showed this past weekend. Moving on to number 2, and the first team that is going to be in the A tier, which is the contenders of the league, I would say. I got a lot of flack for this last week, and I'm probably going to get a lot of flack right now, but I have LAT as the second best team in COD right now. And you might be wondering, how do you have them above a team like Seattle, right? Seattle was in the final. Seattle got second. They lost to Toronto. LAT also lost to Toronto the series before, the round before. But hear me out. Obviously, you don't get to choose who your opponents are in these tournaments. But in the semifinals, LAT ended up going against Toronto Ultra, whereas Seattle Surge went up against NYSL, right? I think if the series were flopped, if Seattle and LAT were flopped, LAT is easily in the finals. They would have also beat NYSL. And in fact, even though not taking anything away from Toronto Ultra, LAT should have won in the semifinals versus them. I think LAT played Toronto, which in my opinion is the best team in the game, a lot closer than Seattle, because they did choke. They should have won that series 3-1. Toronto clutched up. LAT just made too many mistakes simply at the end of that map 4 hardpoint, and realistically in both SNDs. I would not argue if you had Seattle at number 2 and LAT at number 3, but I think that those are the top 3 teams, at least after what we've seen at the CDL kickoff. And that's why I have Seattle Surge at number 3, or it could be 2A, 2B, because Seattle looked unbelievable. I had Seattle high. I believe I had them at 4 in the pre-power rankings, or the pre-kickoff power rankings. And, I had saw and heard that they were looking really good, but you don't ever really know until you see how teams perform on land. But the Surge looked great. They took down London. They took down the Atlanta FaZe. They took down NYSL before losing in the finals to Toronto. But this was a great showing for them. This was a great showing. They're another team that had a positive win-loss in every game mode, even though I will definitely say their strongest modes are Search and Destroy and Control. Their hardpoint seemed very hit or miss compared to a team like LAT, which hardpoint was by far their best game mode. I think that they might be the best hardpoint team in the game from what we've seen at the event. I'm not talking online scrims. I'm not talking any of that. Okay, on land where it really matters. But Seattle was more well-rounded. Even though their hardpoint was hit or miss, they still came out on top in overall maps, and their S&D and control was fantastic. But once again, I'm proud of Seattle, because especially after the last 2 seasons, nobody thought that they could roster a competitive team. And I know it's early. The first actual main season event hasn't even happened yet, but Seattle Surge look like they can contend. So that's why I also have them in the A tier with LAT. And for number 4, I have Atlanta FaZe joining LAT and Seattle in the A tier. They didn't have a good showing this weekend by any means. They only played 1 series. They lost to Seattle Surge. It's simple as that. Now, I will say this. There was a lot going on this weekend for all the teams in terms of the CDL kickoff. It was basically just a good tester for what they need to fix. Like, as a whole, the league, the team on the production side, you know, the developers with any bugs happening on LAN, right? Anything in production that might be buggy with overlays. You know, there's a bunch of different factors going into it. And also Atlanta FaZe had their ring ceremony, so that was obviously really dope. It was special for them. And I'm not giving excuses here for Atlanta FaZe, but I do know that this was only one event. I know it was technically in the preseason. There was some issues with the game or whatnot, yada, yada, yada. And it was single limb tournament. But even though Atlanta FaZe only played one series and lost to Seattle, they lost to a Seattle team that looks very, very good. And they also could have easily been up 2-0 in that series. They lost a nail biter, 6-5 round 11 in an S&D to go 1-1 instead of 2-0. But the maps were competitive and just simple. They only played one series. While it was competitive, they didn't look like FaZe. They didn't look like FaZe. And I do think they're going to turn around without a doubt. That's why I have them as the number 4 team in the game right now. And they're in the A tier because I still think that they are a contender. Moving on to number 5, also in the A tier, I have OpTic Texas. And similarly to Atlanta FaZe, OpTic only played one series where they went up against LAT. And unfortunately, they lost 3-1 in the series. You know, it was pretty competitive, I would say. I was kind of shocked to see it not go to a game 5. I really thought it was going to. But here's the thing. Once again, going into this event, I know that people were saying that they looked very good, maybe even like the best team in the game when it comes to scrims. And I know that they got 5th through 8th technically in this tournament, right? And you have a team like NYSL who got top 4 alongside LAT. How do I have OpTic above them? And it's kind of why I have LAT above Seattle, because OpTic had a tougher draw. And I know you don't get to choose. Sometimes it's simply luck of the draw. But OpTic had to play LAT in that round, right? Where NYSL played a Minnesota team. And I know, like I said, with LAT and Seattle previously, it's the same thing here. Even though NYSL won, if the series were flipped, I think OpTic easily beat Minnesota like NYSL did. And I also think NYSL lose to LAT. You know, it was just tougher competition. And that's how it goes sometimes. And these power rankings aren't just in, you know, oh, Toronto Ultra got first, so they're the first. Seattle got second, they're the second. I use a combination of everything that I see and I read, right? Obviously, this LAN, being on LAN, has a lot more of an influence than online scrims, but you have to take everything into accountability when you're talking about power rankings, right, and tier list. So right now I have OpTic at 5 and NYSL at 6, but once again, I will reiterate before I get all these little toxic ass motherfuckers in my comments saying I'm an idiot, they're all in the A tier. I believe that they could all be contenders right now, and they're all very close to each other. So I wouldn't argue. That's why tier lists are fantastic. I wouldn't argue if you had NYSL above OpTic. I wouldn't argue if you had Seattle at number 2 instead of LAT. I wouldn't argue that. Okay. But so these are the teams that I have in the A tier. That is the top 6 teams in the league right now. This is where it gets fun. Because coming in at number 7 and the first team in the B tier, I have the Boston Breach. Now, Boston only played one series. They lost a nail biter to NYSL, a series that they could have won in that first round. I think this team has a lot of potential, and I think they looked good. But from what I saw, it just seemed like they're missing something. Not saying that they need to make a roster move or anything like that. I think they just need more reps, right? Neuropoison, Capsule need more reps on LAN in that pro environment. But I really like their team. I do. Even though they only got to play one series, I think that they have a lot to look forward to, you know, for the rest of the season. But unfortunately, they moved down a couple spots from my preseason power ranking. Moving on to number 8, I have the Minnesota ROKKR. Now I know, look, they got 3-0'd by NYSL in the quarterfinals. And while I think that they didn't look good, when you really watch that series back versus NYSL, they had some very close games. I was surprised how the S&D went, but both respawns, they could have won. And I know close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, but it was a very competitive series besides the fact that it was a 3-0, okay? Which is possible, by the way. You can have a very competitive series and get 3-0'd. And even though I have them technically going up one in the power rankings from my preseason predictions with them getting 3-0'd, it has more to do with the fact that other teams that I had ranked higher just didn't perform nearly to, I guess, where I expected them to perform, or, you know, that level of play. But Minnesota joins Boston Breach in B tier. Similarly to them, I think that, you know, something is missing. Maybe they're just they need to get on the same page as each other and as a team. But this is a team we know that they can play at the highest level. Okay, they can compete. This team won a championship last year. I know this is a different game, but I think right now they're, you know, middle of the pack team. Coming in at number 9, guys, also in the B tier, I have Florida Mutineers. Now, this was a team that actually surprised me. They played above my expectations, you know, and I can admit that I was wrong because I just didn't see anything going forward with this team. I wasn't really a fan of the roster, just how it was created, but they looked pretty solid, you know, so they get my respect, and I can't wait to see if they can keep improving and proving me wrong. You know, they had a solid ass weekend when it comes down to it. Now, moving on to number 10. And this is going to be the only team in the C tier. It is the Los Angeles Guerrillas. This team shocked me the most out of any team there this past weekend, and not in a good way, because I thought that they were going to be able to easily win their first round, and they just got outplayed. It was simple as that. I mean, when you look at this team on paper, they look unbelievable. Slasher, Gunless, Asim, Huke. Like, this is a very talented roster. And they got beat by the Mutineers, who I thought had no chance in hell to beat LAG. And LAG just didn't look good. They just didn't look good. They looked all over the place, you know, very hit or miss, which you're not going to be successful in Call of Duty if you're inconsistent. It's simple as that. You know, you might have your moments, but to be a very successful team, to be a top team, be a contender, you have to find ways to be consistent. It's that simple, really. And I don't know. They're like a question mark for me, because like I said, I have them in the C tier, where I think that they could have a lot of movement this year. You know, I could see them up in the A tier, but I could also see them in the D tier. It's weird, and I don't know. It just didn't look like they enjoyed playing either, if that makes sense. I don't know that for sure, so I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. But just from my perspective, it didn't look like they were having that much fun, and that also is a big issue. And then the last two teams, they will both be in the D tier. I have the Paris Legion coming in number 11 and London Royal Ravens rounding out the league in 12th. It's tough because these two teams, you don't really get to see scrims that much. So for me, besides seeing some of like the scrim stats, which you take, you know, with a grain of salt, all we got to see was this past weekend. London didn't win a map, didn't even look close, if we're being honest. And now I know their first round matchup was against Seattle Surge, who made it all the way to the finals. And, you know, they're a very tough team to play. But just from what I saw, I can't really move these two teams out of D tier. Now, I will say this, guys, because I want to update these pretty regularly, there's going to be a lot of movement. I try my best to like really stay unbiased and you know, fair as possible with the tiers. I think in the future I might have to like take off the D tier and just make it C as the lowest, because it's like, obviously I think Paris and London are the 2 worst teams in the league. And it looks a little weird having LAG just in a tier of their own. But I think for this, it makes this whole tier list kind of look a little funky. Regardless, though, those are my power rankings / tier list. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Please don't roast me, okay? Or actually roast me. You guys all roast me for LAT anyways, and then we see how they performed not playing all from LA. So I appreciate the love. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to see y'all when I see y'all.